Hey, this is Ben Colby, Teen Librarian at Enoch Pratt. I'm doing this activity video backwards today by showing you the ending first. This is the final product, which I think came out really great. It's a wall hanging that is very flat. Here's a side view. You can see all of the different layers. I did a lot of color changes during the print process. The idea of this design is that every surface is going to look different. It's going to have a different shape and it's going to have a slightly different pattern on the top because we can do that later in the slicer. And you can just ask me to add a pattern like this in the slicer. So we have a lot of different surfaces. We can do clear layers that mean you can see through to whatever's below it. And the clear can contrast with a different kind of pattern underneath. This last one I think is really nice. It looks kind of like a sliced geode. So when you put that variation into your shapes, you can really get a lot out of it in the slicer. Without further ado, here it is. Hi everybody, this is Ben Colby, Teen Librarian at Enoch Pratt. Today I'm going to make a wall hanging in Tinkercad. It's going to be a simple wall hanging with some basic shapes that is meant to show off the capabilities of the printer. So we're going to have some different top surfaces at different layers and at different angles. I'm just going to start right in. I want to hold every part of this together with a scribble shape. So the scribble shape is really cool. I can just kind of make a shape and I can just kind of go over it if I want to make certain parts thicker. And I also have, I can just click that. I also have an eraser, so I'm going to use the eraser to taper off the end a little bit to get kind of a sharp point. That's pretty good. Oops. Try to make it look a little smoother. That's pretty good. And then I'll just do the same thing over here. I just want to try to get a kind of elegant shape going. I'll work with that. And I can kind of, let me tip it a little bit. Maybe stretch it down. And I'm going to make it larger. I'm going to eventually change the height of this whole thing after it's done, or the size. So not too concerned about the size at this point. So I just created these two squiggle wave shapes. And now I'm going to put some other elements on here vertically. And so I'll start with a box shape. And let's shrink it just to a few millimeters. You want everything to be at least a couple millimeters wide. 3 is fine, 4 is fine. And I'll fix all the heights on everything last. So I think I'm going to want a stick with a cylinder on the bottom. Of course, you can use any shapes you want. To align these two shapes, I'm selecting them together, the red and the orange, and I hit the Align button. And I have actually 9 different ways I can align it, but the one I'm looking for is right here. And that will, so now you can see the red and the orange are perfectly lined up with each other. I'm going to copy one of these. And on the top, well, let's stick with this just for the moment. Let's see, I'm going to lower these down so they're not in the way because I want to do this trick where I look straight from the side and I just select these 3 pieces. Copy and paste, put another set down here. And maybe another one right here. So this is starting to look pretty cool. I've got kind of an organic shape mixed with kind of a geometric thing. I want a little bit more variation in these shapes. And the main reason for that is I'm going to use a concentric top infill pattern. And so you'll see a little more what that is like. But I want to make sure I have different shapes on here. So there's one that is kind of pointing off to the side. It looks a little bit like a musical note. And this one I'll just change the size of. Also start by making it bigger, stretch it way up, and maybe I can tilt it back in a little bit. Too big. That's all fine. And then the last element that I want to put in this is a cutout or two in these enlarged pieces. So I'm just going to take a real small little cylinder cutout and stretch it up so that it sticks out. And that's pretty good. This is going to make the concentric pattern on the surface look really nice. And I'll show you that in a second. Once we're done with the design, I'll take it into Prusa Slicer. So I want to put a couple of other little holes on here. Actually, how about there? That's good. And then for the last thing, what if I use the squiggle shape again to create a hole shape? So if I just want to put maybe a moon shape on there with a kind of delicate, sharp edge. Not bad. And so that can become a hole shape, stretching it up. Let's put it there. And let me put another one down here. I'll just rotate it a different way. Okay, and then the last thing is I'm going to want something that can attach to like a nail on the wall, or like a string if you want to use a string. This just needs to be really thin, like just a few millimeters, because it has to hook onto a nail. So I'll just attach it right to that thing. So now I'm going to think about the height of all these pieces. The holes can just stay sticking out, and that's no problem. Let me start here. I'm going to bring this down to 5. Nah, I'm going to bring this to 7. I'll make most of the elements between 5 and 10, so this one can be 5. This one I'm going to drop to 7, and this one I'll drop to 10. And then the sticks, doesn't matter too much. I'll do this one at 7. Or you know what, let's take one all the way down so that you get just an untouched circle here. Because each shape really will look different when we apply the top pattern. This one can be 6 high, this one can be 9 high, and that's fine. Okay, so you can see we're starting to get some textures, some different layers going here. When we change colors in the printer, these will all appear as different colors. I want to make sure everything is different. I don't want much anyway to be exactly the same. So everything, all the red and orange pieces are now a mix of 5 to 10 millimeters high, with the exception of the ring. I'm just going to stretch that out a little bit so that it touches the other two pieces. It'll be stronger and it'll look interesting. Actually, needs to be centered a little bit. That's fine. And then I have these big blue pieces, which I'm going to do one thing to them before I change the height. Let's see. I'm going to leave them a little bit too tall for a moment, and I'm going to rotate them in this direction. And I think just a tip for this one of 2 degrees is good. The problem is it's lifting off the surface here, so now I'm just gonna drop the whole thing and just make sure that that little piece is not sticking above the surface. So I've got a little slant on that piece, and I want to slant this one the other way just a little bit, maybe a little more than the other one, 4 degrees. And I need to lower it until that is no longer sticking out. Very nice. So the 2 blue pieces here are tilted. The last thing I'm going to do is to cut the bottom off. Anything that's below the surface is getting cut off. The easiest way to do this is just to take the height of the box and drag it until it's negative. Stretch it over everything. And now, if I just group everything, I've got a wall hanging. And oh, that's interesting, that piece got cut out. So there should be a lot of variation on the top surface shapes and the concentric pattern that comes off of them. This may not look super impressive right now, but it's been designed to show off the infill patterns. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to export this as an STL. And now I'm opening the Prusa slicer. There's the object. I'm going to do a few things to it in the slicer. I haven't changed any sizes at all. The first thing I'm going to do in the slicer is just enlarge it. I'm going to tilt it to the side and like make it as big as it can go on the printer. And you can always just ask me to do this no matter what the size of your thing is. It's really easy. I definitely want that to be a lot flatter. The only thing is like the really thin part, I don't want to be less than like 2 millimeters. But that looks fine. So I just flattened everything down. And if I were to just slice that, I'm going to zoom in here. This is what the infill pattern looks like normally. This is rectilinear infill, straight back and forth. So if we're changing a pattern, if we're changing colors in the middle, then you might get a color on one side of the circle and that fades to another color on the other side of the circle, which is a nice effect, but it's not what I had in mind. I'm going to change that. Let me also point out that the squiggle shape now has a plate pattern on the top because we're printing this in layers, and so it has to approximate what it's doing with the layers. And this one tilts more, by the way, so it has more plates than this one, which tilts less. So there's a lot of nice variation on these surfaces. I'm going in and I'm changing the infill top pattern right now to a concentric pattern, and maybe you can see the difference. So let's zoom in on one of these little circles first. You can see it's a perfect circle. So if I'm changing colors in the middle, then I'm getting concentric circles of color. I may also get some color shining through from those lower layers that are not covered up in the middle, because that's one thing about the concentric pattern. There are little bits in the middle that don't get covered up. You can see each of these panels has a unique pattern in it. Based on the way the panel is shaped. You know, a concentric infill means a different thing for each thing. And let me also take a look specifically at these top shapes here. The fact that there's stuff cut out and stuff sticking up means that we have a very complex pattern on the front. So I'm going to do constant color changing. This should be a very nice explosion of color. Really looking forward to this.